are with Who Streets, Our Streets, and Solidarity Budget. You're in the room for the Community-Led Advocacy Workshop today. I'm Ethan Campbell. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the First Peoples of Seattle, the Duwamish and Coast Salish tribes. We honor these First Peoples past and present and recognize their stewardship of these lands and waters since time immemorial. And I also want to recognize that we are gathering here in person this year at Garfield High School, which is in the Central District, the home and cultural hub to Seattle's Black community, and the home of Black music, art, and activism from the 1940s through to today. And also, it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And with that, I want to note that this is also not just the home to the Black community, but the home to a legacy of displacement of that community. The displacement that didn't just happen, but was allowed to happen and continues to happen through economic stressors and policies that have pushed out those who hold the least power in the city, continue to push out those communities. So I want to acknowledge and hold space for that loss. And also, on this bitterly cold morning, again, thank you for being here. I would say this is a morning that belongs more in my hometown of Chicago than here in Seattle. I also want to acknowledge that those in this region who are undoubtedly suffering the most at this time are those living unhoused, the majority of whom did not have an indoor space to sleep this past weekend. And as of Saturday night, 7 of the 8 severe weather shelters across our county were at capacity or above capacity. And that's a policy decision that we've made as a society, as a county, as a city. And I would argue that one of the most effective paths to correcting such policy decisions is through community-led advocacy, which is the topic for today. So it would be amazing if we could all introduce ourselves. I'll say a few words about myself and then we'll go down the line. I am an advocate with Who Streets, Our Streets. I do a lot of bike walk advocacy around Seattle, so fighting for safer streets for people who get around outside of a car. And I'm also on the board of Real Change, Homeless Empowerment Project, the street newspaper, and advocacy org here in Seattle. Pass it to Maria.
Yeah. What's up, everybody? My name is Maria Abando, she, her pronouns. I just want to echo Ethan and just say, thank you all for coming out on such a cold day, taking your holiday to be, definitely like engaging and learning and seeing what you can do in your community. It's really inspiring to me. Let's see, my day job is with the UW Women's Center, but in general, I do a lot of community organizing, beginning where I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, here in Seattle and all throughout the South King County area. Let's see, I organize with the Raise the Wage Renton campaign that's happening right now, but primarily I'm also here today to be talking about Who Streets, Our Streets, and just in general, just deeply passionate about community-led, people-centered organizing and advocacy. Yeah.
Cool. And Claire, and you may have seen on the program, Nura was not able to be here today, so Claire's stepping in for Nura from Who Streets, Our Streets.
Shout out, Claire.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Clara Cantor. I'm an organizer with Who Streets, Our Streets, and also with Solidarity Budget, so I sort of cross both here. Like Ethan said, I was not planning on being on the panel, but Nura Ahmed, who was another member of our crew, was going to be on the panel and is sick right now, so I sort of got pulled in. I'm going to let Maria lead a little bit, but I'll jump in wherever I can here. Yeah, I'm a community organizer with Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, and yeah, I just believe so wholeheartedly in the power of community organizing and grassroots network building and how much we can do as people coming together and building relationships with each other.
Hey everyone, my name is Amy Sundberg. I'm with Seattle Solidarity Budget, and I also organize with People Power Washington and Defund the Defund. I got into organizing in the summer of 2020, so fairly new. I heard about what was happening with the protests, and I was concerned, so I attended a community police commission meeting. Yes. And at that meeting, they were discussing, it was right at the beginning of the protest, so very early June, I think. And they were discussing what had been happening in the violence from SPD. And Mayor Durkin, at that time we had Mayor Durkin, was supposed to come, and she came late. And the contempt that she obviously had for that body just shone through. And I will say I knew nothing about city politics. I didn't know much about anything, but the contempt shone through, and I was like, oh no, like things are really, really not okay. And if I, obviously I need to get involved. Like there's no excuse for me not to. So I started out by live tweeting council meetings, and I started a newsletter to try to get more people, first my friends, and then it expanded from there, more people to know even what was happening. And then from there I joined various groups and started writing for The Urbanist, and did more and more, expanded as I went. So that is me.
Hi, morning y'all. My name is BJ Last. I use he, him pronouns. Organized with Solidarity Budget, also with Defend the Defund and Ballard Mutual Aid. Mutual Aid up in Ballard, as the name kind of implies. In terms of when mostly started getting organizing, like not really a right moment, like because everyone is, it's all a spectrum. It's not like a binary yes/no on that one. The closest I can think though for a moment was in 2020, there was a resolution saying that if SPD overspent on their overtime, the city of Seattle would not reimburse them. Haha, surprise alarm. SPD overspent, who could have guessed? And the city went on and reimbursed them, swearing that they were going to take the $5 million out of SPD's budget the next year. When that came up, I was like, didn't see anyone doing any calls to action, so I just like wrote something. I was like, I don't see anyone do anything, but screw it, I'm just gonna like write something out, start sending out to like friends that I knew, networks that I was in, and just ended up getting connected with people through that, because, any one of us can go and do this stuff.
Thank you all for the introduction. I think I see some familiar faces and also some new folks. Would love to go to each of the two groups and hear a little bit about how you got started and what you're all about. Maybe starting with Solidarity Budget.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Solidarity Budget started in 2020. I didn't know about it at the time, but that's when we started. And it kind of arose, I think, from the protests and from this, there was a lot of attention on the budget, the city budget at that time. And it arose from the desire not for all these great organizations not wanting to be pitted against one another, fighting for the few crumbs that are left over in the city budget every year. So who we are, we're a cross-movement coalition. We fight for a city budget that centers the needs of the most marginalized and the most vulnerable, and basically trying to avoid a scarcity mindset when it comes to budgeting, and prioritizing collective care and liberation. And it's also an abolitionist organization, which means that we believe in divesting from cops, courts, prosecutors, jails, et cetera, et cetera. And we also believe in investing in Black communities. And we think all of that goes hand in hand with climate justice, housing justice, participatory budgeting, all of that kind of stuff. In a nutshell, that is what Solidarity Budget is. So our most active time is usually in the fall, which is when the city budget process happens. But this year we're trying to be a little more active, I think, before that.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add on to, as Amy said, like, we're also people from all different groups, like Clara mentioned it. Clara, is part of Whose Streets Our Streets, like Solidarity Budget. All of us are like people from different groups that came together to do, as Amy said, like, we're not gonna get pitted against each other, we're not gonna be sitting here and fighting. Like, so people who want, shelter, people who want affordable housing, we're not gonna be saying, don't fund safe streets. Like, it's no, the money's there, it should come from other sources, we're not gonna fight each other.
I think too, it's like about creating a vision, like a cohesive vision of what our city could be.
Yeah, can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Like, one of the most beautiful things to me about the Solidarity Budget organizing is exactly what you just said, where like we have this vision for the future of Seattle, and when I have my transportation hat on, I can talk anyone's ear off about safe streets and about traffic enforcement without the police and about any of these things. But the reality is, all of that is very intricately tied to housing and to climate and to our court and criminal systems, and all of those things are so interwoven that if we're not talking to each other across movements, like we're less strong, we're considerably less powerful, and we're fighting against each other without even intentionally fighting against each other. And the power of Solidarity Budget Coalition is that we work together really closely around the budget advocacy, and we come together to council and say, these are the 9 demands that we have for the city, and we're gonna fight for all of them, and we're gonna fight for all of them together. But also throughout the rest of the year, when we're touching base with each other, when we're talking about the movements, or the big events and the rallies and the big pushes that we're doing, and bringing all of each other's folks along with all of that, whether it's just educating my people about housing and abolition and all these other kinds of things, or bringing folks out to events where they're learning about other things there. Like, it's all part of bringing the community together and reinforcing our power.
Love it, Claire. Would either Maria or Claire be able to speak to who Whose Streets Our Streets is and what we've been up to for the past year?
Yeah. So Whose Streets Our Streets is basically an organization that also formed in 2020 that is a BIPOC-centered, BIPOC-led group that's basically focused on what does it look like to be safe in our streets, right? Like in the name of it. What does it look like for us to have transportation justice? We know that transportation and our ability to move about our communities is a basic need, right? This is not just something that like is a privilege. It's a basic need. We all know that in order to access food, to access work, to access community members, we have to be able to get around. And the reality is that there are some folks in our communities who have more access to that, feel safer doing that than others. And so Whose Streets Our Streets, I think, really formed out of that idea. Whose Streets Our Streets also, from my understanding when it got started, was really a partnership with Seattle Neighborhood Greenways to try and figure out how to work with some of the institutions that already exist to be able to fight for those things that we know would be able to make our community safer in terms of transportation and moving about safely. And I think what I really, really love, I'll say I haven't been with the organization maybe as long as Clara has, but what I really love about it is genuinely, we're really centering community voices. I'll say when I came into the space, and I've been organizing for quite a while. I think I've been going to like city council meetings since I was like in middle school. I've been doing organizing work inside these institutions, outside of the institutions, be that initiative campaigning, electoral campaigns, voting justice work, like all over the place, you name it. This has been really one of the spaces that I've actually seen do community-led advocacy in a way that has been different. And genuinely different in a sense that, I might come in and say, oh, I know exactly what can make our streets safer, right? Like, I'll say transparently, like, I'm an abolitionist, right? On some of the topics that we have been discussing that we could get into, particularly around automatic enforcement in Seattle with our automatic enforcement cameras, like those red light cameras and the school zone cameras. In my mind, I'm immediately like surveillance, punitive measures, like cut it, like we don't need it, right? And I could come in with that attitude, and that's what I want to advocate for. I think folks within Whose Streets Are Streets, whether they agreed with me or not, were really encouraging to be like, you know what, Maria, actually what we have to do is ask the community what they want. Because it's not just about us who have the time to have meetings, sometimes in the middle of the workday or after the workday, and who have a little bit of expertise, right? Like that we think that we have, like in these fields, because we've been going to the meetings or we've been understanding that language and doing all of that. My perspective is not more valuable than someone else who has never been to a city council meeting, but also lives, works, engages with the communities and in these streets as well. And so our role was really to ask the community what they need, and then be able to amplify, make sense of that information, and amplify that to the institutions that we do have access to, because I think of the level of connections and influence that we have as an organized group. Would you want to add anything to that?
Totally. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about Whose Streets Are Streets as well. I think, just going back a little bit to when we first started, we as a group kind of did a lot of churning, a lot of talking, like what are our priorities, what do we want to be doing? We came up with a big list. And then we kind of like put a little stop on it, and we were like, okay, like we need to be out in the world talking to people. So we spent almost a whole year basically just going out into the community, talking about community safety. And we were coming at it from a transportation lens, particularly like community safety on our streets. But we had people talking about all kinds of different things and really reinforcing the idea that all these aspects of our lives are so intertwined, and you can't just kind of pull it out and talk about transportation without talking about employment and housing and displacement and where you're going and how you're getting there and the time that you have to do it, and childcare and all these different things that are impacting how we're choosing to get around and how we're able to get around. And like in talking to people over the course of that year, some of our original community priorities, or our original group priorities, became community priorities later, but the list expanded and grew and got really deeper in a lot of really crucial ways. And through that process, we were continuing to advocate for some of those things that were kind of top of mind for people. One of the big things that we talked about that year was parking enforcement. And particularly for folks who have been displaced out of the location where their communities are and where their community institutions are, and are driving in from really long distances to get there. It was a really big deal, when those neighborhoods, when they lose access to those neighborhoods. And we talked a lot about automated enforcement was one of the big things that came up. Which then we just focused this whole last year going a lot deeper on automated enforcement, because we're kind of in this moment where, automated enforcement is considerably better than police enforcement. Like, hands down, there's not a chance that the camera is gonna harass, pull a gun, kill anybody. Like it's a camera. And I think there's a lot of people in positions of power, not just in Seattle, but across the country, who are seeing that and being like, oh, all in, let's just do all of that, without really thinking about the other implications of an automated enforcement system. In Seattle, we have expanded the number of tickets that we give out via automated cameras by 50 times in the last couple of years. It's just a tremendous increase in the amount of punitive enforcement that we're putting out into the city, and the implications of that. The people who are unable to pay, who end up, in collections, or there's just a lot of, there's not really great alternatives for folks who can't pay, and then there's a lot of kind of very striking equity issues with the programs that we have in Seattle that nobody was really like digging into and trying to fix before we did this rapid expansion. So we were out talking to the community, doing a little bit of education about what programs exist and hearing back from them their concerns, what they thought was the best way to move forward, because it is kind of a thorny issue, you know, like it being considerably better than armed police enforcement is like a really not minor thing, but it's also like not the only thing to consider. So that's what we've been focusing on this year, and it's been fascinating. We put out an initial kind of preliminary report with some of our early findings as we were advocating for what the city should do with the camera expansion. And we've done a lot of outreach, surveying, talking to people, one-on-one conversations, listening sessions, and are putting together our next report now.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that a little bit too, genuinely, I've really, really appreciated how intentionally intergenerational, intentionally, the real intentional efforts to reach communities that normally might not be in these conversations and normally might be reached with some of these efforts. There were like intentional youth conversations, intentional meetings, specifically looking at elders. That is like mildly traumatic. I'm late for class.
Well, the first ball is okay. That means he can run. But the second ball is that's the one.
For sure. What an honor to be in a youth space and educational space like this. But intentional community sessions that were focused on hearing from elders and the things that they had to say around, how far away are bus stops for folks to be able to access, what the types of things with tickets that are really, really expensive for folks that are on fixed incomes. All kinds of really intentional efforts. When we did our survey collection, we did around a lot of community events where we knew that there would be a lot of BIPOC folks attending. We were collecting surveys at pretty much every Summer of Soul event this summer, and more than that. I think the vast majority of our surveys came back from folks who identified as Black or within these BIPOC communities. And so I think, we all can recognize that when people vote, right, and that's just one step of using your voice and civic engagement, that the vote kind of skews towards people who have a little bit more wealth, have a little bit more feelings like these communities or these policies serve them in a way, and just generally skew white. Like, we know that. And so I found it really, really beautiful and impactful to be doing intentional work to reach folks who might not be as engaged in these systems. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I think I want to bounce off briefly of something that Maria said. I love when you're talking about coming into this work with an abolitionist mindset and having to maybe take the notions that you have and put them aside to first listen to community and hear what community would like us to be working on. So I come into this work with a researcher mindset, a researcher by training, and that means that when we're looking at automated enforcement cameras, the first thing that comes to mind for me is like all of the studies that show that they're effective at getting people to slow down, that they are effective at reducing traffic fatalities. So great, we should be doubling down on this. And for me, in a group like Whose Streets Our Streets, the first thing that I need to do is to put that aside. And that's why we do so much surveying, why we do all these listening sessions, is to actually get a true impression of what community wants from us and the nuance and the diversity of perspectives within community on these topics that are often, especially with things involving traffic enforcement, really multifaceted and sometimes a little counterintuitive. So like, when Maria mentioned the survey we're doing, we found out of, something around 250 responses that it was roughly split between people who wanted the city of Seattle to remove cameras, and then slightly fewer people wanted the city of Seattle to add more speed cameras. And for a group like us, we have to think about what do we do with that sort of feedback, especially when it's coming largely from within the Black community, within communities of color, from a really geographically diverse set of responses here. How do we filter that out and make some sense of it, and then advocate for a position that's going to lead to a more equitable and a safer city?
No judgment. How many people here have gotten a speeding ticket based off of one of those cameras?
Not in Seattle.
Not in Seattle? Yeah. Red light, school zone. Yeah, so initially, the folks that were doing research in our group were finding that those cameras were disproportionately placed in communities of color, right? Speeding does not discriminate. People across communities speed, but we found that those cameras were concentrated a lot more in communities of color, and therefore, getting money a lot more from communities of color. We know that those cameras, the fines can be really expensive. It's like $237 for those tickets, right? A lot of them, I think they weren't giving warnings. All of that money, that's the one. That's the one.
You're in trouble now.
That's the one. You might think that the money that comes from those cameras is going to be going right back into your community, figuring out how to make your streets safer and how to, make things better, especially if you're getting that money from communities of color, that it'd be going right back into it. And we found that that's not the case, right? A lot of it was going to the general budget, which probably our folks who on the Seattle, solidarity budget can tell you, that 22% of that money goes to cops. And a lot of that just ends up being appropriated for a lot of different things based off of the whims of the council and what's needed, especially with big deficits that come up. They pull from different funds to fund things that might not go specifically to the community. We were finding that people were saying, hey, how come that money can't go to speed bumps? Thank you. Speed bumps. Or like the lights at the crosswalks, making sure that the lines are a lot cleaner. All kinds of folks have ideas around what we can do to protect folks who bike. There are things that we could do. Now I'm going to just keep doing this, but the
Roundabouts,
the
yes.
roundabouts in the middle, like all kinds of things that could go towards making the streets legitimately safer as well. And of course, those punitive measures can prevent somebody if you don't have that extra $237. In my case, like if that money could go towards medication, if it could go towards groceries, right? Like if it could go towards things that folks are already struggling with in terms of meeting those basic needs. Just in general, we can find ways to make this process better, and that was the real focus of a lot of these surveys and this outreach.
Well, and I know that then lapsed over into budget, not this past year, but the year before that, we spent a lot of time talking about the school cameras. Because they were proposing to expand them into a lot of primarily Black and BIPOC neighborhoods. And thinking of ways of getting the, deterrence so that the streets do become safer without having that disparate financial impact. So we talked about having warning systems, right? Where the first time a camera catches you speeding or whatever, you don't get the $200 whatever ticket. You get a ticket just saying, hey, watch out, this is your warning. And it turns out, I think, that a lot of times that's enough. Then people are like, oh, I don't want to have to pay a $200 ticket, and they won't speed in the future. But it's not, taking away their ability to pay for their medications and their food, et cetera, et cetera. So ways in which you can be more equitable about making the streets safer.
First time warning, never get a ticket at that location.
So I mean, it's almost as effective, like, you know, it's actually very effective. And thinking about, you know, we're always trying to get different revenue streams in to pay for the programs we want to see, but we shouldn't be relying on the ticket revenue stream that is inequitable in the way that it's enforced. We should find different, more equitable revenue streams.
So I think we're going to spend some time thinking about the upcoming year, which is going to be a doozy. But I want to first go back and take some time to celebrate things that have happened over the past year. If there are any wins that you want to share, personally or from your group, big things that happened over the past year that we're proud about. I think we'll start with BJ or Amy.
So I'll go. So two things I can think of. One, participatory budgeting. Money was set aside for that, for community to actually vote on projects that they wanted to get funding. That finally happened. There was voting, the money was awarded end of the year, so that is awesome. That was a long time coming. And also in this budget, we managed to get $200,000 for non-carceral domestic responses to domestic violence. This came out of a report that was done in the prior budget. It almost didn't make it into this budget. We managed to push to get it in there because it was only like $200K. And as someone who has had experience with knowing people who've been in DV situations, the carceral system has never been an option for them. So getting something non-carceral funded was personally really cool and awesome.
Yes.
Also, I'm really good at not reading my own notes here, but and not just a win, but anything that felt really personally meaningful or inspiring.
Yes, I think, you know, I was working closely on that domestic violence funding as well, and it's certainly, I was in tears at one point because I thought it wasn't going to go through, and I had thought it would, and then it wasn't, and then anyways, it was a roller coaster, and so, like, to get it at the end, I was like, whoa, okay, we did it. So that was very meaningful. The other thing that I worked on a huge amount last year was guaranteed basic income. And most of the year I spent just researching, learning more about it, so that we could advocate for it in an informed way. And then when we developed our Solidarity Budget campaign for last fall, we structured it around 9 guarantees for the city, and one of those guarantees was an income guarantee, which was guaranteed basic income. And we put together a big event with a panel of experts, local experts who are already running these sorts of programs. It was just amazing to see the community come together and have food. And then we had this panel. We talked about the basics. We talked about why it's exciting. And then I think what was the most meaningful to me about that was just how engaged everyone was who went and how many questions we got. Like, people were just very interested, and I found that really inspiring. And while we did not win a program, the goal is kind of to get community to start talking about it, or to even learn that it's a thing that exists. Right now we're fighting for a state level program. And it's just, for me, coming from mostly working on criminal legal system problems, a lot of it I have found is kind of, I feel like I'm on the defense a lot. And I'm like saying, no, actually this is bad. Actually, no, let's rethink this. So for me to be able to advocate for guaranteed basic income, which is a yes, let's do this thing, it's amazing, was really energizing. It really helped me, like, you know, get back into focus and be more positive in the way I was thinking. And I know I'm just gonna 1 minute because I love it so much. But it's guaranteed basic income is amazing. They've done like 100 pilots across the nation since 2020, which is really when the idea started taking off. There were a lot of pandemic funds that were available to use for these sorts of things. So I think that's partly what really got it pushed off. And the the results that we're seeing from these programs are just astounding in terms of, there's just so many different benefits. And that's everything from food security, housing security, basic financial security, but also like in terms of educational attainment for kids, brain development of babies actually improves. There's violence drops. There's some new studies showing that it actually decreases violence in the neighborhood, so it will be really interesting as they continue to study that, because I imagine that that might pan out more and more over time. And there's a new study that I just read about this weekend that was in California, San Francisco, and LA County. They gave each person $750 a month, no strings attached. And what they found in that study was that it was primarily housing and food security that were the big ones. And I jotted down on one of my many, I know, I have so much papers. The unhoused, when the study started, 30% of recipients were unhoused. 6 months later, 12%. So it went from 30 to 12 just with the basic income. It's not a panacea. It's not good enough by itself, obviously, which is why we pull all these things together. But I do think it's a really exciting idea and an important piece of how we can bring more equity and more thriving into our communities overall. So I'm very excited about it. That was what I was probably most excited to work on last year.
And it's happening locally too. I mean,
Yeah, there are
there's-
several programs. There's the one in Tacoma is kind of a model in the nation, to be frank, which is really exciting. But also we have small ones in Seattle. We have three small ones that I know about in Seattle that are operational right now.
Who are they, Amy?
Tell us more.
You know me so well. The Lavender Rights Project has a teeny pilot. Hummingbird has a pilot that just started last fall that's for pregnant Indigenous women, but then it lasts for several years, so when the children are quite young. And then there's a small one that King County Councilmember Zahalai, basically he got a little bit of extra money that normally the council members would spend on like office furniture or maybe another staff member. And he decided to do a guaranteed basic income pilot with that money, which is amazing. They had a UW team come in and do an independent report on it as well, and that one has been incredible. And it was so impactful. He said it's one of the most personally impactful things that he has done as an elected official. And it was so impactful that they're continuing it. And he was like, yes, I'll just keep putting this discretional money towards this program so that we can keep it going.
That should be a slogan, guaranteed basic income, way better than office furniture.
It is. I mean, but also, right, I do think that speaks, to somebody's character, that's how they're thinking about things. So I thought that was pretty cool. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, something that I found really inspirational. I think I was actually trying to see what my fellow panelists were going to say with theirs, because there's been so many moments of just trying to kind of hit the diversity of things here. But how many folks in here know the name Genevieve Condola? Okay. So as it ties to our work with Whose Streets Our Streets, but of course just as our, as community members, Genevieve was a graduate student here in Seattle who of course was hit and murdered by a speeding police officer while she was just crossing on a crosswalk, I believe in South Lake Union. And it's impactful in a lot of ways. A lot of it mostly escalated, I think, and was able to hit a lot of news lines when the recordings came out. I think because of the work of people who were behind the scenes requesting public information about the cameras that the police officers were wearing during that time. uncovering that when Janvi was hit, that people, or that the police union was like laughing about it, saying that she wasn't worth very much, that they could throw money at it to make it go away, and just a real disregard for everything that she was and everything that she could have been if she would have been able to be safe walking on a crosswalk in her community, right? So it was really obviously frustrating to hear, and one of many in our area, but of course in our nation, instances of police being able to take the life of somebody and basically get away with it. So I think one thing that I found really inspiring this year, amongst many things, was just the way that folks within Whose Streets Are Streets and community were able to show up and rally and just really bring more attention and call Bruce Harrell and the police to try to have some accountability, right? I wouldn't say that they did that, but what I would say was that the efforts that we did to have conversations, to bring people together and show up. I can speak in particular to a rally that happened on Bruce Harrell's birthday. We were able to do to march to his house. I really appreciated the level of folks that came from different communities. I was really grateful to see folks that came from communities from different organizing spaces. I have to shout out Guillermo Zasleta, who's in the room right now, who I organized with with the Rent and Raise the Wage campaign, which I highly encourage folks to look up as well if you're thinking about wages in the general region and how they can increase with the cost of living. I saw folks from that space show up. I saw folks from different South Asian organizations that I've worked with in the past show up and just really come together in solidarity and just in remembrance as well. And I found it really, really beautiful. I found it inspiring in a sense that I'm still angry about it. And I'm still angry about, as we think about Tacoma, I'm still angry about Manny Ellis. I'm still angry just in general about what the police does with our taxpayer money, and use that to kind of fire a lot of the work that I'll continue to do moving forward. And I'll say just quickly on that as well. You've heard that pretty much everyone on this panel organizes with like 2 to 3 or more different groups, including myself. And undoubtedly here in this room there are folks that organize in different ways, in different capacities with yourselves. And I just want to encourage us to continue, as we organize in the spaces that we organize with, to seek that cross collaboration, right? This has been such a beautiful cross-collaboration with Solidarity Budget and Whose Streets Are Streets. And I think that folks have a really good ability within these two groups to do that, working within the system, working without the system, and trying to find some balance and recognizing that for a lot of these issues, we have to hit it at a lot of different angles, right? So I encourage folks, to show up in different types of spaces. Even just uplifting the work that you're doing in different types of spaces can build collaborations that you might not even expect, and that can really lead to something a lot bigger and really beautiful. Of course, the proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go further, go together. And so I've really felt that with this group, and that's really been something that's just inspired me to keep moving forward in this year and as long as I've got breath in my body to keep doing it.
That's organizing 101 that I wish I had when I started. That's some good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Maria. And I'm actually going to not talk about the thing I was going to talk about and talk instead about something based on what you just said. One of the things that I find most inspiring about this work that we're doing is the space that we're creating together. And you were focusing focusing more on when we're cross-pollinating with other groups, when we're building relationships kind of across organizing silos, or into people who are working with city government and people working outside of city government. I think also, like, as an organizing body, the way that we interact with each other is so important.
Right.
And within WSOS, we've been really, really intentional the whole time that we've been an organizing body about who we're bringing into that space. One, what you were saying earlier about being really intentionally intergenerational, making sure that we have representation from queer and trans folks, from youth, from elders, from disabled community, making sure that we're creating a space that has a lot of voices intentionally in it, and then that we're valuing and uplifting those voices and really working at the speed of trust, like you said. And part of that is that, like, you really have to slow everything down a little bit. You have to be really intentional about, like, eating meals together and, like, getting to know each other as people. And, like, we do very intentional, like, skill sharing with each other to try and, build up the skills of our young organizers that are, like, just kind of coming into this and learning a lot about the world through this work. And sharing the skills and the connections and the information that we have very, very intentionally creates a community of people who trust each other and support each other and are showing up for each other's birthdays and showing up for these, rallies and events and asks that we're having with the work that we're doing outside of WSOS. Because again, many of us are involved in all of these different kinds of things. And that trust and those relationships are what makes that cross-pollination powerful and successful. And it means that, we all have different hats and all of our different things, but eventually we want those hats to just kind of become one hat, like just become us. And wherever we're showing up, we're bringing all of those things and all of those relationships and all of that power with us.
For sure.
And I think being intentionally in all BIPOC space, it's a different kind of a culture and community that we're creating there that is sometimes lacking a little bit in white organizing spaces where it doesn't necessarily, there's more of a focus on getting the tasks done and moving toward the deadline and, like a very kind of action-oriented culture.
A lot of true words there. I want to ask all of you sitting here, not to put anyone on the spot, but I'm really curious if there are any moments or movements that inspired you over the past year, whether inspired you or even better inspired you to take action in some way. And since I think we have a small crowd, if you just want to like raise your hand if you have anything to share.
I can share. My name is Kylene. I use she, her pronouns, and I actually know Ethan. We ride together in the Ampersand Bikes Club, and Maria, what you just spoke on, just like gathering everyone together. We helped organize the Solidarity Ride for the Palestinians last weekend, and it was just like, like the call to action from Native Women Ride was like very short. We had like a week and a half to organize, and it was just so cool to see all from like everybody from like different bike groups all to come together for this specific ride and purpose to raise funds for the Gaza Sunbirds. And so it was very like moving just to see everyone show up from all of the different bicycle communities, and it was just last week, and so it was very fresh and just you can feel just the support from everyone, and yeah, it really spoke to me. So
So this last year, I've moved to being a mostly full-time bike commuter, and I've been really enjoying seeing the Seattle greenways. And it's not that I didn't know they existed before; I totally did. And like the streets that are being shut down by the city, like that's been awesome and cool. But watching them actively go up since I've started biking has been very inspiring to me. And Jeff just makes me kind of happy. Yeah.
Go greenways.
So feeling, yeah.
Anything happening locally that you feel really, really happy to see in the news in the past year?
the morning in the rain and already seeing maybe like 150 or 200 people already formed at the gates of the port was really inspiring. And I think just every time people have been hitting the streets in defense of Palestine, and then all the creativity and community that's also been built in that surge of uprising against the genocide has been one of the only things to help with the despair, feeling, in these moments. So, and then also just the way that I think their resistance is being really given the appreciation and credit that it deserves for holding back the type of aggression that's all backed by this government too. So from local to international, I think was really inspiring to see this year.
Absolutely.
Not quite city budget, but a little.
It was an amazing night.
On the ground in Atlanta for the petition collection was amazing. So I felt really like plugged in. I got to stay there for a little bit of time. And the organizing was awesome. It was collective. It was decentralized. It was just like a strange, different protest activism world. And there's a lot of awesome people there.
What was the petition?
Petition to Stop Cop City.
Oh,
Yeah, they got like, I don't know, over 100,000 signatures.
Yeah.
So I got to see a bunch of the effort. It was intense, but it was really, really wonderful to see. Lots of spirituality and church and singing.
Yeah, great example of a cross movement.
So I mainly organize down on the south end of King County in Renton, but I used to live in Seattle, and I'm also with the DSA chapter here in Seattle. And I think it's, not so much connected myself to it, but 2023 was a big year for labor. And the work that I do, I've gotten to interact with a lot of different labor organizations, national and local, that scored a lot of big wins last year, and they're preparing for a strong 2024 in the legislative session. But more personally, with the campaign that I helped run, Race Wage Renton, a big accomplishment personally was qualifying for the ballot. And city politics outside in the suburbs of Seattle in the greater metropolitan area is tough because we face conservative politicians who don't care about people, working people in particular. They're landlords and business owners, and something that might be foreshadowing how Seattle City Council experiences might go this year. Sometimes you gotta force these people to just act, and the initiative petition process is a very powerful tool for working people, and it takes a lot of footwork, but I've learned a lot, just getting to work with county elections, with the civic clerk, and that relationship is very, there's no manual for that.
Democracy, door to door.
Yeah.
Groundwork.
can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add to this collective space that we're having right here. This world that we're living in, this country that we're living in, it's not built for us to thrive. It's really not. And we're, as organizers, as people moving about the community, just as people, we're just dealing with a lot of really heavy shit, all the time. Whether it's genocide, whether it's murder on our streets, whether it's even just something like a really positive program you've been working on to push for and it doesn't pass. All of it is just exhausting, it's tiring, it hurts our hearts, and it's exhausting. And when we're in space like this, when we're celebrating each other's wins and inspirations, when we're in organizing bodies where we have relationships that have trust, we can hold each other through those tragedies, through that exhaustion, allow each other to take rests, allow each other to breathe through our own personal tragedies that are happening in our lives. It creates such a stronger movement when you have those relationships and when you have those bodies that you can really lean on, where you can be able to step back if you need to and then step back in when you can, when you're able to do what you can and not worry about what you can't because somebody else is going to be taking care of it. That's what makes these organizing bodies strong. And if we're all kind of in it for ourselves and doing our own thing and trying to do everything, we're all going to burn out at the same time and everything is going to crumble.
Yeah, there's no more sure recipe for burnout than feeling like you have the world on your shoulders, and that's no way to organize. Yeah. I think that was a great segue into 2024, and just looking forward to this upcoming year. What do our groups have on the horizon? What are some ways that folks can get plugged in to that work? And any hot tips on strategy in this new political climate in Seattle, where we're dealing with a very different slate of elected leaders than we have had in the past? I'll start with solidarity budget.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of thinking on, looking ahead, we all see what the council is. What is a lot of stuff is still like movement, pushing for stuff. It takes time. We've seen this with things like, community organizing. Like, if you want something to change tomorrow, like to win your project, it's not going to happen. Sorry. Like, these things take time. It builds. It's a lot of getting people together, reaching out to others, and also public education on things to get that going. Like some examples, like How's Our Neighbors passed in Seattle last year. That was going outside of the city, outside of that process. And that's not something that was like really quick. That was multiple years to go and get that off the ground. Someone talked about like the neighborhood greenways expanding. Yep, that is one where we have seen that like incrementally keep moving over the years. It was, I'm sure Clara and Maria can attest, like a big push to ever get that launched of like trying to actually build out bike lanes and bike infrastructure. The payroll tax, the tax on high earners at large companies, that took years to also get passed, and getting people, public education on that, showing what the benefits would be, and going to get that. So on this year, and something like this of looking ahead, it's not getting discouraged if there aren't short-term wins, because a lot of this, it's longer term. So keeping that in mind of it's all sort of building, pushing for things. It's not like slow increments that we see on things. It's a lot of time building, pushing, and then something goes through. So looking at it sort of that way. So something Clara said, going out, like working with the rest of our community, talking to them, a really big one on that. Like solidarity budget, one thing we're doing this year is, Amy mentioned, we're typically most active during budget season. The budget season's a train wreck. Or like, seriously, like the city makes it as inaccessible as possible, because it is less than 2 months between when the mayor puts out their proposed budget and when it has to go and be voted on. So there's like no time to do like anything in that. It is a massive crush, a massive rush. So we are trying to actually do like trainings, skill up workshops throughout the year for people that are interested. So that way it's not like, hey, there's a budget out, you have questions, we have to, have this 1,000-page document read in like 48 hours to do like feedback. So we're starting to do those. First one is actually January 31st at 6 o'clock.
It's a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday, thank you. And what we're doing, because it's not just like Amy and I and other people saying stuff, it's everyone in solidarity budget, we're figuring out what our priorities, we're asking people to vote on like what topics. So like potential topics that we have for January are, Amy, do you have anything to say? Or should we do this later?
No, we should do this right now, but I wonder if, should people raise their hands if they're interested as you read? Or do you want to read them all?
Actually,
Just logistically.
so logistically, because you can vote for all topics, this isn't just like what would be your number one, but if you're like, yeah, that's cool, that's something I'd be interested in showing up for. So just raise your hand as they go. So the first is just like how to council watch, like during the year, keep track of like what the city council is doing.
I see 3.
3, cool. Next up is intro to the budget process. Like what is it, how does it go?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6, cool. Then we have budget analysis. The budget comes out, how the heck do you read through it and figure out what the heck is in this literally like multi-thousand-page document?
I'll let BJ.
You really sell it.
3 people. Okay. And then we have op-ed rating. So help on writing op-eds.
I love op-eds.
2, 4.
Writing small articles, so I'm sure you got.
Yay, people like all this.
Persuasive writing.
That's all.
And a plug for that, for one of these trainings do happen. If you sign up to be a volunteer for Solidarity Budget, that's how we can help keep you in the loop to let you know when these things are coming up. Just because we're not like collecting email addresses or whatnot from y'all today.
We are collecting email addresses from you
Oh,
today.
yes.
There's a sign-up sheet over there. If you haven't signed in.
Also, let's make sure you do so when you leave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We also have, there are like QR codes or just SeattleSolidarityBudget.com. You'll see where to sign up.
And we're thinking we'll do like one evening per month with different topics. So, you know, some topics you might be more interested in and some less. But that way you have choice in terms of what to do. In terms of the bigger question, I know, you know, after budget season, I was just really, really tired, to be honest, like more than I thought I would be. And I had to take most of December just to rest, which again was not unexpected. But while I was resting, I was also thinking, because it's hard to stop the brain. And, you know, I think thinking about the new kind of climate in Seattle that we're facing right now, like one of the things that I've been thinking about is just being really willing to think outside the box, or just, we don't have to do things the way we've always done them, right? It's okay to pivot, it's okay to adjust, like it's okay to like try something and maybe it totally falls flat on its face. But that's part of it, right? Like if you don't try something, you don't know if it's gonna be effective or not. So I'm just trying to think of, instead of just going with the flow and doing exactly what we've done before, you know, encouraging myself to think outside of that and think, what else can we do? And you know, maybe personally I'm not a direct action person. That's not been where my focus is. But maybe I need to put more focus there. You know, I am a watchdog type person, and like maybe, you know, like so I'm like probably this year I want to focus more on my writing and making sure that gets out and people actually know what's happening. So, you know, even though in some ways I feel like this year is going to be challenging, like it's also an opportunity to try new things and to level up in different ways. And I know too that I will get very frustrated in the course of it. And to have these relationships I've built that I can lean on, and that I can continue to build, like just, you know, personally as a how do I not burn out while working on this and engaging with this level. I know that that's going to be helpful. Like I've already been leaning on that. I tend to be I like to work alone type of person in general. I'm a novelist, right? Like I just sit and I write for hours by myself, and that's great for me. But I realized very quickly that in this sort of work, that is not what I wanted to do, and that was a bad idea, and that I really needed to push myself to connect with others and to learn to work with others and, you know, communicate, work on all of those sorts of skills. So I think that for me, it's just an opportunity for me to do that more, and to really lean into that. And I think down the road, that will just, you know, pay off dividends, both in terms of my own mental health and happiness, and in terms of what we're able to do together.
And how can folks follow you on social media and read your newsletter?
Yeah, I have a newsletter. It's Notes from the Emerald City. There's a website. It's notesfromtheemeraldcity.com. There's also a newsletter. It's Substack, which sucks, but it's free. And I don't, but there's no money charged. If you want it directly to your email, you can send it, and I will never turn on the subscriptions for the Substack because Substack is an awful company. But, or you can just go straight to the website. And I'm also still, hanging on Twitter, because what I do on Twitter is raise awareness of the things that are happening, and like, you know, I do a lot of retweeting of news with maybe some analysis. So I'm still there Again, terrible company. If you don't want to be there, I understand, but I am doing that there too.
I'll give a plug. I have learned so much from Amy's website and newsletter.
Yeah.
Like so much. Whether it's just tracking stuff that's happening in the city that I don't have the time and mental capacity to track, or like more in-depth analysis of those things, it's really good.
It's basically, I read all of the independent news sources and then I decide, I'm like, these are the important things, and it's once a week. So you can just read 5 minutes once a week and kind of get the highlights, basically. Because I thought that would probably be useful for a lot of folks who are too busy to do all of the more in-depth reading. And then I link to everything. So if you want to do more in-depth reading, then you can go and you can read the whole thing.
I found it valuable too. Yeah, very briefly from Who Streets Our Streets. 2024, with being plugged in. Any thoughts?
Question.
What's
Ways
coming
to
up
get
to us?
plugged in 2020.
Oh.
How are we going to survive the next year?
I had an idea that I wanted to share on this, but it's not about how we get plugged in. I just wanted to say, like, organizing in times with political opposition, like, I think it's really important that we kind of zoom out a little bit, because in years where we end up spend a lot of time kind of turning our wheels and doing a lot of defensive organizing and stuff that like doesn't necessarily feel as much like progress as we might like it to, like, if we zoom out a little bit, like for example with Solidarity Budget, like the first 2 years that we worked together as an organization, we were the only big city in the country that defunded our police force 2 years in a row. Like the only one. And it was a direct result of community organizing and advocacy. And, we refunded the police the last 2 years, but we're still in a better place than we were. Like the general trajectory is still positive. And as we're having these years where we're doing a lot of defense and fighting a lot of like less than favorable people in positions of power, like we still have those tiny incremental wins, but we have to just kind of zoom out and think like, if our goal is abolition, like that's not a 1-year goal. That's not a 2-year goal, that's not a 4-year goal. And like the small things that we're winning and the small things that we're doing and in the political processes are getting us there, but more importantly, like that public education, that base building, that like turning the conversation on the ground is what's getting us there. And if we kind of keep that as a goal, we can make sure that we're still focusing on those things and alongside some of the defense that we're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally along lines with that, and I think probably with Who Streets Our Streets, we have been taking time to analyze the data that folks have been sharing from community and think about how we, take all of that information and move forward. But I definitely want to uplift a lot of the sentiments, Claire, that you're saying, right? Like us taking that time to check in with ourselves is really, really important. Also as a BIPOC group, I will say I haven't been in a whole lot of all BIPOC organizing spaces. And one of the things that really has been transformational for me is really looking, a lot of time in organizing in white spaces, we're always looking at, how do we organize and how do we realize what people who aren't us, what they're doing, wrong, that they could be doing better, and what we can do to move that forward. And we don't spend as much time thinking about what are we maybe doing wrong, because we can do things wrong too, What are ways that we're failing each other, and what are ways that we can take the time, slow down, check in with each other, uplift each other as well, when we get so focused on playing defense a lot of the time or seeing what a lot of other folks are doing. So I really appreciate WSOS taking a lot of time to internally work on ourselves, check in with each other, and battle that constant feeling of urgency that we all know is, a tool and characteristic of white dominant culture that we've got to continue to unlearn and unwork. That urgency of work never ever comes before the well-being of ourselves and each other, right? So So I'm continuing to think about that as we face a tough 2024, and in general, especially just thinking about Martin Luther King and the civil rights organizers and the Black Panthers and the folks that came before us. They taught us that hope is our greatest weapon, right? Even if it seems like the goals are super far away, and for them in the 60s, certainly it felt, a lot further. I think they knew that the values and the foundation and the community that we're all fighting for, bless you, are all going to last. They're going to last. We're not going to get snuffed out. We're going to keep on fighting, and that hope that there's always going to be more people, there's always going to be more moments, and there's always going to be more energy towards progress. That hope is our greatest weapon. So we've just got to hold on to it. The things that folks have uplifted that have been going on in your communities in Tacoma, whether it's with transit, whether it's Atlanta, all of those things make me very, very hopeful. So I thank you for that, and encourage us to lean into hope.
As far as getting involved with us, if you share your email on the back, there's a page going around, or if you click on the QR code on some of the yellow flyers back there, we'd love to be in touch with you. We're working, continuing our work on automated enforcement this year. We made some small wins with the equitable distribution of the cameras and warnings for first offenses and
Lower
lower
fines.
ticket prices.
I forgot to say that.
We're gonna continue pushing on that this year. We have a whole slate of different things that we're advocating for. There's some stuff moving in the state level during this session that's going on right now that maybe Ethan can share a little bit more about, but we've got a lot going on. We'd love to be in touch with you.
There's so much, yeah. The fight continues. Legislative session is going on. If you see any bills that you want to support, it takes just 30 seconds to sign in as pro before that bill has a hearing. It's really easy on the state legislator website, so I encourage you all to do that. And that was an amazing note to end on. It's been a long march, and we'll continue. Stay in the fight. Thank you all for being here.